Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, we are going to dive right into things today because we're looking at something that has literally captivated humanity for centuries: pyramids. These towering, massive structures have popped up in vastly different cultures, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. It's almost like a shared global obsession, right? Now, it's really tempting to attribute these ancient skyscrapers to, magic or myth or maybe even aliens. But instead, today we're going to look at the spectacular human ingenuity behind them, from the blazing deserts of Egypt and Sudan, all the way to the dense jungles of Mesoamerica. The actual, real-world engineering history is honestly way more fascinating than any sci-fi fiction out there.
And hey, speaking of fiction, let's kick things off with a massive claim that recently went totally viral online. Have you guys seen the sensational headlines about Gunung Padang? The claim was basically, did we just find a 25,000-year-old pyramid hidden beneath an extinct volcano in Indonesia? A team of researchers said their ground-penetrating radar revealed an ancient Ice Age pyramid built by some super advanced civilization, literally thousands of years before we even invented agriculture. I mean, it sounds incredible, right? Total movie plot material. And naturally, it caught the whole world's attention like wildfire.
But, well, here is the reality check. Experts worldwide thoroughly, and I mean swiftly, debunked this claim. Archaeologists like Flint Dibble and Bill Farley stepped in and basically said the evidence is, quote, really, really weak. When researchers actually drilled down into the soil, they found absolutely zero evidence of human presence. No bone fragments, no lost artifacts, nothing. Finding ancient carbon in soil just means the dirt is old. It definitely doesn't mean humans sculpted it into a massive pyramid 25,000 years ago. Look, I get it. People desperately want pyramids to be the work of lost magical sages. But as we're about to see, the real documented history of what humans actually built is so much more impressive. So here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the evolution of Egyptian pyramids. Then we'll look at how they engineered the impossible. After that, we'll head south to check out the Nubian pyramids, then leap across the globe to Mesoamerica's monumental temples. And finally, we'll wrap up with why this shape is so universally human. All right, Section 1, the evolution of Egyptian pyramids, moving from sand to stone. The most common misconception is that these perfect, smooth-sided Egyptian pyramids just appeared out of thin air in this sudden burst of technological genius. But the truth? They evolved. It was a step-by-step, trial-and-error process over centuries of architectural innovation. And it all started with something called the Mastaba. Long before the pyramids, the Egyptian elite were buried in these simple, flat-roofed, rectangular mud clay tombs. And get this. Even those mastabas were just an evolution from earlier, prehistoric oval pit graves dug right into the desert sand, which naturally mummified the bodies. So mastaba was really just a formalized architectural version of a basic burial mound. If we trace this evolution, it's pretty incredible. Way back before 3100 BC, we just had those oval pit graves. By 3100 BC, we see those mud clay mastabas. Then, around 2670 BC, a seriously brilliant architect named Imhotep had a radical idea for King Djoser's tomb. He started with a traditional mastaba, but instead of stopping there, he decided to build it out of stone and stacked 6 progressively smaller mastabas on top of one another. Boom! The very first 62-meter step pyramid at Saqqara was born. Decades later, around 2600 BC at the Medem Pyramid, architects tried filling in those steps with a smooth limestone casing, a huge transition. And all this relentless innovation ultimately culminated in 2560 BC with the iconic Great Pyramid of Giza. Which brings us right into Section 2, engineering the impossible and unlocking the builder's secrets. So once the pharaohs decided they wanted these smooth, towering mountains of stone to, align their souls with the stars, they ran into a massive logistical nightmare. How on earth did they actually pull this off without modern machinery, without pulleys, or even the wheel? Just look at this number, 2.3 million. That is the estimated number of massive stone blocks required just to build Khufu's Great Pyramid at Giza alone. And these weren't pebbles. These blocks weighed anywhere from 2.5 to 15 tons each. For Khufu's monument to be finished within his 27-year reign, human muscle had to quarry, transport, and perfectly place a block every 3 minutes, day and night, non-stop. So the big question is, how do you move millions of massive rocks across a desert? Well, the answer is actually this brilliantly simple, scientifically proven 3-step method. The Egyptians placed these heavy blocks on wooden sleds. Now, if you've ever tried dragging a heavy cooler across the beach, you know exactly what happens. Dry sand piles up in front of it and creates this impossible barrier of friction. The ancient builders solved this by pouring highly precise amounts of water onto the sand directly in front of the sled runners. It's genius. This simple act bound the sand grains together, dramatically reducing the friction, preventing that sand buildup, and literally allowing a team of workers to glide 15-ton stones across the landscape.
Okay, so they got them to the site, but how did they get them up? For the longest time, people just assumed they used massive external ramps. But actually, scratch that. A straight external ramp reaching the top of the Great Pyramid would literally require more building material than the pyramid itself. Plus, we found zero clear archaeological evidence for them. Instead, new mathematical models and structural analyses strongly point to the use of internal, spiraling, indented ramps. This meant workers were essentially building the structure from the inside out. Pair that clever ramp system with their remarkable stone-cutting precision using nothing but copper saws, bronze tools, and sand abrasives, and you've got an absolute engineering miracle, driven purely by human sweat and intellect.
All right, moving on to Section 3, the Nubian pyramids. Let's talk about Egypt's African neighbors.
If we travel south along the Nile River into modern-day Sudan, we hit the ancient, incredibly powerful Kushite kingdoms centered around Napata and Merowe. They adopted the pyramid shape, for sure, but they created a completely distinct architectural tradition. And get ready for this number, 255. That's the number of known pyramids constructed by the ancient Nubians. That is more than double the number built in ancient Egypt. So, fun fact for you, Sudan actually holds the record for the most pyramids in the world. And they built them over a nearly 1,000-year stretch, from 700 BCE all the way up to 350 CE.
But they looked really different. While the Egyptians built sprawling pyramids with a fairly gentle 40 to 50 degree incline to hide the pharaoh's tomb deep inside the stone masonry, the Nubians went a totally different route. Their pyramids had a much narrower foundation footprint and shot straight up at a super steep 70 degree incline. The biggest contrast, though, the Nubian pyramids didn't actually house the tombs inside. No, they were essentially elaborate, monumental tombstones sitting on top of the real subterranean burial chambers, which were completely sealed off below ground.
Let's jump over to Section 4, Mesoamerica's monumental temples. We're heading across the globe.
So, leaving Africa entirely, let's look at the pre-Columbian Americas. Here, entirely unconnected civilizations, like the Maya, the Zapotec, and the people of Teotihuacan, arrived at the pyramid shape completely independently, and for totally different cultural reasons. The definitive architectural signature of this region is something called the Talud-tablero. Basically, it's an inward-sloping surface, that's the talud, topped by a vertical rectangular panel, that's the tablero. This highly iconic step style vividly shaped the magnificent pyramids in the booming ancient metropolis of Teotihuacan, down near modern Mexico City. Imagine these giant step structures, but they aren't bare stone. They were painted in brilliant, imposing shades of dark red, towering over a bustling city of 100,000 people. Just incredible. And I've got a surprise for you here. To put things in perspective, the largest pyramid on Earth by volume is not in Egypt at all. It's the Great Pyramid of Cholula, located in the Mexican state of Puebla. Constructed over a millennium, from the 3rd century BCE to the 9th century CE, this massive stepped earthen and stone structure is technically the largest monument ever constructed by humans anywhere in the world. Now, the absolutely crucial difference between these continents is what these structures were actually used for. Egyptian pyramids were incredibly private. They were solitary resurrection machines, sealed airtight to protect the divine pharaoh on his journey to the afterlife. Mesoamerican pyramids, on the flip side, were highly public. They were these bustling, massive stepped platforms that served as the foundational basis for public temples, religious rituals, and community gatherings right at the very top. They weren't just quiet tombs, they were active, living stages for the whole community. Which perfectly tees up our final section, Section 5, the universal human shape. It's physics, not magic. Okay, so we've seen pyramids in Egypt, Sudan, and Mexico. Honestly, we could also spend hours talking about the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the platform mounds of North America, or the ancient temples of Cambodia. But why? Why did so many completely unconnected cultures choose this specific towering shape? The answer is just physics. A pyramid naturally has the majority of its mass closer to the ground, with a gradual decrease in the cross-sectional area as you go higher up. This offers absolutely perfect weight distribution. Long before the invention of steel frames or modern cranes, if an ancient civilization wanted to build a monument as high into the sky as possible without the whole thing just collapsing under its own massive weight, the pyramid shape wasn't some secret gifted by ancient aliens. It was simply the most logical, natural solution dictated by gravity.
And that leaves us with a pretty incredible final thought for today's explainer. The true magic of the pyramids isn't found in wild conspiracies about lost Ice Age civilizations, right? The true magic is human ingenuity. From figuring out how to master the friction of wet sand to carving microscopic precision steps into actual mountains of stone, the pyramids is a monumental testament to what organized, driven human beings can accomplish. So I'll leave you with this. If completely separate cultures across the globe could independently engineer towering mountains of stone using nothing but rudimentary tools and immense collective willpower, what other impossible feats is humanity capable of achieving next? Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, and as always, keep asking the big questions.